The 21st century will go down in cultural history as the age of superheroes. What started as a cult interest has exploded into the public consciousness. It may have been DC that swayed the masses of Batman, but it was Marvel that turned a would-be fad into a lasting craze. At the start of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Disney purchased the comic book company for a cool $4 billion. They're now worth an estimated $53 billion. But alongside our Endgames, Winter Soldiers and Doctor Stranges, we've also seen a rise in Marvel's power in the video game space. And their rise to prominence on consoles and computers is almost as surprising and unexpected as their upsurge on screen. So settle back as we tell you how Marvel's 40-year history of games all started with one surprise title by a lone developer. So the MCU has delivered with it a lot of tie-in games, but these aren't really what we think of when we reference stellar Marvel titles. For those, we look outside the MCU, Insomniac's Spider-Man, Guardians of the Galaxy, and the LEGO series to name but a few. All excellent collaborations in their own right, and showed what happens if you give an IP a little love and care. Yet those examples are few and far between in Marvel's game history. Yes, you have a few cult classics. Marvel vs. Capcom, Ultimate Alliance are standout games in their own right. But these are nestled away among your Ghost Riders, Fantastic Fours, and more X-Men titles than you could shake a stick at. The point is, over the decades, there have been many and all imaginings of beloved Marvel characters on dozens of consoles. But before Blade on PlayStation 1, before Punisher on the Sega Genesis, and before Silver Surfer on the NES, there was one game that started Marvel's breakthrough into the world of video games. Spider-Man, released in 1982 on the Atari 2600, or the Atari VCS as they were also known. If the title or even console are falling on deaf ears, well, there's a reason for that. And it's not about the game, it's about the time. The game was released at the very end of what we'd consider the golden age of arcade games. Pac-Man, Space Invaders, and Donkey Kong had come, wowed the world, and left. In their absence, there was a void, which would be filled with a mad dash gold rush to create as many games and home consoles as possible. Games like Atari's infamous ET, and consoles like the Atari 2600. Yep, the reigning kings of the video game market were the biggest offenders and contributors to its downfall. The saturated market led to a lack of consumer confidence, and the market crashed in 1983. Not a little veering off and gently grinding to a halt. I'm talking a full-blown catastrophic collision, a 97% market drop. The industry picked itself up a few years later, but it meant that a lot of titles were lost to time. Things like the first Marvel game, for instance. So you won't find 1982's Spider-Man in the back catalogue of some esteemed developer you know and love. It didn't even have a full team behind it. It was the creation of a sole developer, Laura Nikolic. This isn't the story of someone following their lifelong dream to develop video games either. This is more the story of someone taking a wrong turn and accidentally making history. Her background wasn't in games or entertainment at all. Starting at a nuclear power plant, she began sidestepping through various positions in a range of industries. Kind of like Homer Simpson, but, you know, competent. At telecommunications company Motorola, she gained first-hand experience in the skills and practices she'd later need to develop her first game. And again, she didn't know she wanted to make games. She accepted a position at a financial software company, and while at a hotel meeting clients, she stumbled on a job fair. It was hosted by Parker Brothers. You know, Monopoly, Cluedo, they'd go on to become part of Hasbro. Anyway, she struck up a conversation with the organisers, who thought she was in the wrong place. And with credit to them, she kind of was. But they couldn't help but be amazed by her resume. They offered her an interview, and later a job. And Laura had made her first step in becoming a game developer and creating the first Marvel game. So at Parker Brothers, as was the case with every developer, the workforce was almost entirely male. Coding was a man's game, as was the thinking at the time. When it came to divvying up roles and responsibilities for upcoming projects, most of the male workforce were assigned to work on Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. Laura, on the other hand, was given the task of creating a game based on the Spider-Man comics. Given the lightning-fast action and superhuman feats that the hero was known for, surely there's no end of things you could do with the concept. Just look at Insomniac's take on it. There's an awful lot you can do with a teenager who shoots webs out of his hands. Unfortunately, consoles back then couldn't handle anything like that. This was before 3D graphics, animated sprites, or proper side-scrolling. In fact, there wasn't a whole lot you could do with an Atari VCS, outside of a screen with a few blocks. Laura's work was definitely cut out for her. It took her 6 months to conceptualize and plan out the game's core gameplay mechanics, and then design and code them. She was a technical engineer by origin, not a game designer, so this led her to think about the process in a different way. Rather than have all these ambitious ideas about what the game could be, she recognized the constraints of the system. Yes, Spider-Man in the comics can do all these things, but let's just focus on a select few and make them work. She opted to focus on his web-slinging abilities and have him traverse buildings and fight his nemesis, the Green Goblin, at the top. While this development was going on, the men of the company were hard at work on their Star Wars project. Laura's humble concept wasn't landing well with the marketing department. The men were cramming all the action of a space opera blockbuster into a 4KB cartridge. She could do better than simple climbing. They soon came around when they realized that she knew exactly what she was doing. Her technical background came into play as she utilized things like digital differential algorithms and other technical wizardry to make the game work. These solutions look complicated on paper, and to us, the layman, they are. But for her, they were concise solutions to achieve smoother gameplay on the console's limited power. So, the marketing department came around. That's not to say the whole endeavour was an uphill struggle. Recounting on her time at Parker Brothers, Laura said that the team around her was supportive, friendly, and accommodating. They facilitated creative discussion and respected her work as a coder and a game designer. Marvel were also a pleasure to work with by all accounts, in that they gave Laura the creative control she needed and didn't interfere. It's just marketing departments in game companies. They tend to not see the finer details. They like to meddle. But with those issues put to rest, Laura got her head down and tended to the task at hand. It wasn't going to be easy. She was a sole developer for a game without having a background in game development. Her concept had already been under tight scrutiny, and due to the nature of games at the time, they wanted this project completed in a timely manner. Oh, and I forgot to mention, she was pregnant during this whole ordeal. Yes, going through the daily roller coaster that is pregnancy, she turned her concept into a reality from her home office. And despite everything, she did it. The game was completed in less than a year since the idea was conceived. It may not be much to look at in this day and age, but this was what they had to work with in the hardware at the time. If you compare it to the Star Wars game the rest of the team were working on, well, they're not miles apart in quality, are they? And again, this was a team of Parker Brothers' best and brightest male coders versus a one-woman show. It did draw criticism for its similarity to another popular arcade game, Crazy Climber, and if you put them side by side, yeah, I can see it. But then again, Crazy Climber was made by a team at Nichibutsu, a developer who already had experience with several other titles. Spider-Man was made by one woman who stumbled into the job almost by accident. Makes the latter seem a lot more impressive in comparison, doesn't it? And with the game finished, the project a success, and Laura making history as the creator of the first Marvel game, the title shipped. Did it have a needlessly confusing, extremely 80s television commercial tied to it? Of course it did.
I'll blow this town to smithereens! Time bombs! Try to get up there in time, Spider-Man!
Watch me cut my web, Goblin!
Watch yourself fall, Silk Slinger!
Gotta stop the bombs in time!
If I don't get you, webhead! My diagnosis will!
Holy Hannah!
And you're running out of fluid!
Is this more action than even Spider-Man could handle?
Spider-Man, a video game from Parker Brothers, the ones to beat.
God, look at those sparklers. They don't make game ads like they used to, huh? So Laura's first Marvel game may have set the stage for others to follow, but unfortunately for everyone involved, the market crashed the following year. Atari's days at the top of the market had come to an end, and their consoles, as well as the titles created for them, would mostly be forgotten. When video games started to gain traction a few years later, new beginnings were made by the likes of Nintendo, and a market of major players would solidify over the next few years. And with them, so too would key gaming franchises. Whilst Marvel games quickly faded away after a brief time in the public eye, they would return on better hardware and to a more receptive audience. Spider-Man would return to the Game Boy and Sega Genesis. Captain America would make his debut on the NES. Soon after that, Marvel Entertainment was formed with divisions for different mediums. Marvel Games focused on virtual worlds, and Marvel Studios would begin their road to Hollywood dominance. And from there, the rest is history. After the Disney acquisition, Marvel Games got absorbed into Disney Interactive and saw some of the biggest studios in the world clamour for a shot at the IP. Capcom, Activision, Insomniac, Square Enix, 2K Games all wanted to try their lot with the characters that were taking the world by storm. It's impossible to not recognise the stature of the cinematic universe. The films are raking in billions of dollars and creating a cultural craze at its height in modern cinemagoers. Likewise, the AAA games gracing our screens are huge productions, created by some of the most renowned studios in the world. Laura Nikolic didn't stick around for a life in game production after creating Spider-Man. She was laid off from Parker Brothers during the market crash, with only 4 games under her belt, 2 of which were unreleased. Her developer story ended when she left the company, but the Nikolic legacy did not. Her sons would go on to pursue jobs in the game development industry, following in the footsteps of their trailblazing mother, a mother who'd regularly meet up with her former colleagues and reminisce how, for a few short years, they were making history.